Welcome back to Propaganda by the Seed. This week I've got a fun chat with ethnobotanist Linda Black Elk to share with you. But before we get to that, I just want to say, fuck Trump and every coward who licks his filthy fascist boots. It's disgusting to see the little support available for the poor and disabled in this country shredded to give tax breaks to billionaires and turn ICE into the 13th largest military on earth. The most hopeful thing I'm seeing in this sea of despair is people standing in solidarity with their neighbors against ICE. It's going to get harder, but I hope we can all rise to the occasion. Instead of a jingle for another Channel Zero podcast, I'm just going to plug the latest pod to be added. It's called The Dugout. They cover radical thought, decolonization, and black liberation. Two black anarchists, Jordan and Prince, dissect news, culture, and literature, challenging narratives, and exploring black, queer, radical knowledge. Find them on your favorite podcast app or on the Channel Zero Podcast Network. Linda Black Elk, welcome to Propaganda by the Seed.
Hi, thanks so much for having me, Aaron.
How are you holding up in these extra fucked up times?
Oh my gosh. Well, the only thing that I can say is that the only thing that helps is to scream about it a little and let people know what I'm thinking and feeling. And getting outside, of course, really helps a lot. But yeah, we can't keep quiet right now and hold it in. The other day, I posted a photo of a Cheeto with push pins in it. Sort of a...
Yeah, I saw that. That was very cathartic.
What, right. Those kinds of things, my husband always says that Native people handle the most horrible situations. Like, it seems so inappropriate sometimes because they'll laugh at the most inappropriate things, right? And I think that that's me right now, laughing at inappropriate things, because what else are we going to do?
Yeah. Sometimes you gotta laugh just to get through the day.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's wild times. Well, I always like to start off by asking people about the work they're doing with plants and kind of how they got started on that path.
Oh, sure. Yep. So I call myself an ethnobotanist, and that's a whole discussion in and of itself, because even though I do like work with ethnobotanists and I've written ethnobotany articles and taken, of course, done a lot of studying in ethnobotany with people, like individuals, and also like in academia. The definition of ethnobotany is the study of the relationship between people and plants. And I probably take a different approach to ethnobotany. But I don't call myself a herbalist. Like, that just doesn't fit, right? I think of herbalism as something that a lot of, people more of like European descent do, where they just work with plants and make medicine. Whereas I really do focus on how we as individuals develop relationship with plants. And so I taught for almost 25 years at a couple of different tribal colleges, which are universities located on mostly on reservations, but there are a couple of urban tribal colleges as well. And then, I taught for a long time, and my husband wanted to be a farmer. He's Lakota from the Cheyenne River Reservation, but he wanted to be a farmer and wanted to take part in a project in Minnesota. So I quit teaching formally, and now I work for NATIFS, North American Traditional Indigenous Food Systems, long acronym for a really cool Native-run nonprofit located in the Twin Cities. So I'm the education director there now, and that's really fun. And I don't know, I came to all of this through a few different ways. Like, I was always very drawn to plants, maybe even plants more than people. people are really difficult.
That's understandable. I feel you on that one.
Right.
I mean, I like people too, but
I do. I do. I enjoy visiting and stuff, but plants are just so great and understanding, and they're very good listeners. So I that started very early. My mom, who is part Korean and part Mongolian, but Korean from a Pacific island called Jeju Island off the coast of Korea. She had to know plants in order to survive. People talk about like growing up in poverty, but my mom grew up literally having to forage to live. And so she taught me a lot of what she knew when she brought that over here. And then my paternal grandmother knew a lot of plants. And like I always tell the story that my first memory, I couldn't have been very old, but my first memory is walking around collecting wild onions and pokeweed with her, poke salad. Yep. And I was eating the onions as we were walking, and she said, "Your breath is going to really stink bad. But someday," she said, "you'll find someone who doesn't mind your wild onion breath. And that's how you know he'll be the one." And when my husband and I met, and I asked him what his favorite plant was, he said it was wild onions. So I was like, aha. And yeah, we've been together ever since. So
that's a great story.
thank you.
So often when I ask people to come on the podcast, I've got like one particular plant in mind. But my impression of you, based on following you on social media and such, is that you have a really broad base of plant knowledge. And I was hoping we could talk about a few of your favorite plants, especially those that you feel are like underappreciated or undercultivated. Like if there's a plant that, some people are familiar with foraging, but doesn't really make it into gardens. That's one of my favorite topics, and I thought you would be a great guest to touch on that.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love this topic. And, it's kind of funny. I'm sure that you experience this too, but we get asked what our favorite plants are a lot, right? Which is like the hardest question for a botanist. It's like asking a real car person what their favorite car is. They have a lot of them, but I have a lot of favorite plants, but I definitely have, a few in mind that I can talk about.
Awesome.
Yeah. Can I talk about the first one?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, I get really excited. Okay, so this is going to sound crazy because I don't know that I would call this an underappreciated plant, but maybe one that's underappreciated as a medicine. And that would be, I've already mentioned it, onions, like that whole genus, onions and garlic. We think of onions and garlic as being these constant, important culinary herbs, spices, things that we use in all cooking. Even people who don't like spice tend to use onions, right? But I think we've forgotten what an incredible medicine onions and garlic are. Onions in particular, I suppose, for myself. We put onions in everything, but do people use them with intention? Because onions are incredible for our lungs, for example. They are expectorant, kind of like that stuff, people get over the counter called Mucinex. We all know if you've ever chopped an onion and it makes you cry, that's because onions have a compound that affects like our bodily fluids, like the fluids that come from our eyes. And they thin up those fluids and allow them to flow better. So if you have lung congestion or if you have sinus congestion, onions are equally great for thinning up that congestion so that you can get it out of your body. And onions are also really great for lowering blood pressure. So if you're on blood pressure medication, eating onions every day can actually help to stabilize blood pressure. So you don't have to worry about them taking your blood pressure too low. They really help to regulate. They're a regulating herb. Um, so, I don't think people think about that very often. They're also really good for your blood sugar, like stabilizing blood sugar. They're great for your kidneys and your liver. Any of those filtering organs benefit greatly from onions. So, oh, and they help to thin the blood a little bit too, but just a little. So they're just such an incredible medicine. And there's so many ways. Like the great thing, another great thing about onions is that no matter how you consume them, I mean, if you're eating, onion, like green onion kimchi, I like to make ramp kimchi, allium trichokum kimchi, and you're like getting all the medicine from the onion, plus you're getting medicine from the fermentation, and it's a great way to preserve them. So I think that like there's something so beautiful about having delicious medicine, like stuff that, they say a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down, right? I prefer to think of it like when you prepare these medicinal foods in the right way, that's definitely a bonus. So, so yeah, I'm a big fan. And, I know that a lot of people collect different wild onions, whether it's the non-native Allium vineale, or, ramps, Allium trichokum, or, where we have lived and where my husband is from on the prairies of the Dakotas, you get Allium textile, which is a really cool, very pungent wild onion. Just a little one, but the Lakota have been collecting it and using it as both food and medicine for forever. So yeah, I'd say that's my first one. Do you like
Cool.
onion?
Yeah, I love onions and the sort of constellation of other alliums that are, I don't know, they're very interesting and beautiful and tasty. Um, and there's so many of them, and they all have a little bit of their own flavor.
They do. I love that. And they're, like you said, they're beautiful. So they make amazing landscaping plants as well. I always tell people, like, well, I think some people get a little upset when I tell them to plant like garlic chives or onion chives and they start to go crazy in their yard. I've never looked at that as a bad thing. Like, give me a whole lawn of them and I'm okay. But they do spread, which is also nice because they're perennial and you don't have to worry about, replanting them from seed every year. So that's cool. And every part of them is edible too. So, you get the bulbs and the leaves and even the flowers and the seeds are edible. So that's kind of nice too.
Yeah, and there's a neat sort of there's sort of a local onion to every region. So if you want to be planting alliums as like a habitat planting, in addition to using it as food and medicine and as an ornamental, there's probably, one that's well adapted locally and, part of the ecosystem.
Absolutely. Yep. And they're good for the soil. They break up soil so that it's more aerated. So, yeah, ecologically important. I mean, who could ask for anything more, right?
Absolutely. Great first pick.
Awesome. Thank you for saying that. Um, if I've been thinking about this a lot, and of course it is really hard, but I suppose if I had to think of another one, and like just talking about my favorite plants, well, I will say this one. I don't know if it's underappreciated, but I think that, well, I get the question a lot. Like, if you could only take one plant to the moon with you, what would it be? I get that question a weird number of times. So, and my answer is almost always the same. It's almost always nettles, stinging nettles, Urtica dioica, right? Which I think a lot of people worldwide appreciate, but maybe not, like for its plethora of uses. Like, people know that it's a good anti-inflammatory, so it's great for treating arthritis. So much illness is caused by inflammation. I think we really underestimate that. Like, inflammation is the origin of so many of the illnesses that people face today. So, I mean, even really, asthma, which I'm asthmatic, so that's important to me, is inflammation of lung tissues, arthritis. Oops, sorry, I had set an alarm to remember to be on with you. So to turn that alarm off real quick. But asthma is, of course, inflammation of the lungs. Arthritis is inflammation of joint tissues. Um, Even depression and anxiety are attributed to inflammation quite often, inflammation of brain tissues in particular. Sinus issues and allergies are inflammation of the sinuses and eye tissues, and even inflammation of like nasal and lung, nasal nose and lungs. Um, Inflammation is just such a huge issue, and nettles are really one of the best plants for treating that, in my opinion. And it's great because you can do so many things with them. You can eat the nettles, because with any cooking, all the stinging effect goes away. People are very hesitant to harvest nettles, but we've always been taught that if you harvest them barehanded, you'll never get arthritis in your hands. So we harvest them barehanded all the time and we let them sting us. um, Onions are poetry, really. I know that sounds crazy and kind of like a tree hugging, but I do hug trees, by the way. Um, but nettles really are poetic because I've written poetry about nettles, but which I'll have to send one to you sometime. But you know, they I think in our culture these days, we have become so accustomed to healing being a matter of popping a pill, right? Um, oh, you have pain? Here's a pill for that. You can't breathe well. Here's a pill for that. Not feeling happy? Here's a pill for that. Restless leg syndrome? Here's a pill for that. I mean, there's a pill for everything these days, and we want it to be instantaneous because these pills, these prescriptions, while I'm super thankful for Western medicine, I hate the idea that you pop a pill and you're better, because the fact is the whole goal of most Western medicine and most of the pharmaceuticals is not to heal you at all. It's just to cover up your symptoms, right? It's not to heal you, it's to prevent the symptoms from happening so that you don't remember that you're sick. And I think that that's really a shame, because there's so many amazing traditional medicines for people all over the world that are effective and safe. And nettles is really one of those, that treats such a multitude of issues along with inflammation. I mean, it's great for washing your hair with as well. When you make a tea out of it, so good for hair and even your hair follicles. Anti-inflammatory, full of protein, so you can drink it as a tea. You can eat it in soups and stews. You can dry it and add it to all kinds of spice blends. You can blanch it and then grind it up and use it in pesto and pasta sauces. You can even use it in cakes. I see people make nettle cakes all the time these days. And not only is it an incredible food and medicine, which I love things, like I said about onions earlier, I love things that are both. But nettles are a really important cordage plant as well. They have amazing, strong fibers that are efficient to collect and process. So, just such an incredible plant. And you can use it as shampoo. So, zombie apocalypse, you can look good. Um, I love that one. Nettles, are really one of the first plants I learned about. I guess when you run into them, you tend to learn pretty quick. Uh, my husband and I both have kind of bad knees from playing sports when we were younger, and anytime our knees start to hurt us in the during the growing season, we'll both put on a pair of shorts and like go run through the nettle patch and, challenge each other to how long we can handle it. But once we do that, once we like let the nettles whip our legs, we're pain free. Our knees are pain free for like months afterward. So yeah, amazing plant.
Very cool. One nettle question is I've heard some people say you shouldn't harvest them after they bloom, and I've heard other people say that's like it doesn't matter, you can harvest them all season long. What's your opinion?
Okay, so I'll give my opinion on that. So if you take older nettle leaves at the like toward the base, center and base of the plant, you can actually, and this is for the science teachers out there, you can actually add a polarized lens to your microscope, put the nettle leaf under there, and see all the silica crystals through that polarized lens. Like they look like little tiny shards of glass, and they get very shiny, and it's kind of fun for kids to look at. Basically, what looks like glass in a plant. And so, like the older leaves do get very high in silica, which in moderate amounts isn't horrible for you. But if you're using nettles or eating them every day, or you know, you will be consuming quite a bit of that, and that can be tough on your liver and your kidneys. And so, I really recommend that if you, let's say, you forgot to harvest your nettles in the spring, or you just don't have time, or maybe you even ran out. You can harvest nettles later in the season, just get the younger leaves at the top of the plant. And if you get them after they've gone to flower, you can eat the flowers, which have tons of medicine in them as well. And you can eat the seeds, which are actually shockingly efficient to harvest, full of protein, really delicious, very crunchy. They're great sprinkled on some avocado toast. So, highly recommend that as well. But just make sure to get the younger leaves up at the top. If you're just using them, those silica crystals tend not to come out into the water very much, especially if you filter your tea like through a coffee filter. So if you're just making tea, or if you're using them for a skin salve, which that's another thing you can do with nettles, it's amazing for skin, especially for eczema and psoriasis. Um, then you don't have to worry about it. You can harvest them anytime.
Great. That's a really detailed answer. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. I know we had said three. So I think that I'm gonna go with it's tough to choose. Okay, I do feel
We can do as many as you want, just to put it out there.
oh, thank you, thank you. Um, well, like we harvest a lot of different plants during the year. I think I let you more, and then you can decide. Let me give two more, and then you can decide if you want to keep both of them, or have your listeners listen to both of them. So one of them would be Monarda fistulosa, wild bergamot. Some people call it. Some people call it horse mint. Some people refer to it as bee balm, which is probably the common name I use the most. And this is not an underutilized or underappreciated plant for native people who tend to use it a lot. But I think that most people think of it as an ornamental, something that they plant, or even people think of it as a pollinator plant, which I think is great. We need more pollinator plants, pollinator corridors. But wow, it is probably probably the most antimicrobial plant that I know of. I mean, like you can make an infusion or a decoction of bee balm and use it as a wash for infected sores, or like some people get a little bit of like infected hair follicles going. It is amazing for infections. Um, Again, if you're a science teacher, a fun project to do is to inoculate petri dishes with, like, have kids do a swab of the inside of their mouth and grow all the disgusting stuff that's in our mouth in a petri dish. So many different colors. It's freaky. It's also a great way to get young people to think twice about who they're kissing. Um, uh, but you grow that stuff overnight, like in an incubator, and then you can take dried plants like bee balm and add some to the plant, or you could like make a tea and add the tea to the petri dish, dried plant to the petri dish, whichever you want, and you can then let them go again overnight, um, and then have the kids measure the ring of inhibited growth. So there'll be a ring that has basically killed everything around the plant or around the tea that you put in the petri dish, because it's so antimicrobial. It just will knock out most everything in that dish. It's wild. So powerfully antimicrobial plant, and it tastes like oregano. So it's like you get this amazing antimicrobial plant that's also delicious that you can use as a spice in so many different dishes. But to me, I mean, it tastes like oregano, but it tastes like oregano plus flowers. Like it has like a floral background flavor to it as well. And again, the entire plant is useful. So the flowers, the leaves, the stems even are great for tea, and a little more mild than the leaves and flowers. So yeah, it's such a wonderful plant, powerfully antimicrobial. You can use it as a mouthwash. You can use it as a poultice, for infected wounds. Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah, I really like the flavor of Monarda. Makes a great infused vinegar too.
Yes, it does. It tastes a lot like oregano vinegar. Yeah. We make that. We put it in all of our salad dressings anyway, so we make a lot of Monarda vinegar, which is, by the way, Monarda vinegar is amazing for H. pylori as well, which has become
Oh,
a
interesting.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, if you have a healthy gut microbiome, that might be partially why.
Very cool.
And then, oh, what was the other plant that I was going to mention? Um, I had it in my mind when we were talking about the Monarda. Oh, I know what it is. It's in English, it's called cutleaf coneflower. Um, Scientific name Rudbeckia laciniata. And the Cherokee, I tend to use the name Sochan for this plant. That's the Cherokee name of it. Um, and I think it's cool to utilize indigenous names for plants. But Sochan is beautiful, first of all. So it's one that you can like if you're interested in permaculture, if you're interested in indigenous landscaping or native landscaping, if you are interested in medicinal landscaping and edible landscaping, I mean, it's like all of those rolled into one because it is so beautiful. It gets these almost like black-eyed Susan yellow blossoms, with a beautiful like cone in the middle. So it's even beautiful after it's bloomed. But the leaves are absolutely delicious. They are a traditional food for a lot of indigenous people all over the world. So my mom always grew sochan as a green vegetable, but also as a medicine because, well, let me talk about the edible uses first, and then I'll get to the medicine. But the leaves is in particular, we like to harvest the younger tender leaves, and they are great as like a pot herb. You can put them in soups and stews, but you can also kind of stir fry them or saute them, kind of like how a lot of people do dandelion leaves and bacon. You can do the same thing with sochan. Let it cook down for a little bit and have it like as a green. It's great in rice bowls and all kinds of stuff. The way that my mom did it, which is actually probably my favorite way of eating it, is she would collect the younger, tender leaves. She would blanch them quickly, just for about 10 seconds in boiling water. Then she would put the leaves in an ice bath to stop the cooking process, and then squeeze all the water out of the greens. Now you can freeze them just like that and have like a delicious, healthy, fresh green all year long. But what you do with that is you take the blanched sochan leaves, and you just sprinkle a little like flaky salt and drizzle a little sesame oil on top, and that's it. That's all you need: salt and sesame oil, and it is so good. Um, by the way, I know like I'm going way over my limit of 3 plants, but you can do that exact same thing with Solomon seal shoots, Polygonatum biflorum. A lot of people don't know that Solomon seal greens are edible, but I grew up eating the young shoots. They look almost like a curled up little corn plant when they're young. And you want to make sure to harvest those sustainably, because if you over harvest, you can have very negative effects on that patch of Solomon seal. But Solomon seal or sochan, you can eat them both that way by blanching, putting in an ice bath, wringing out the and then adding salt and sesame oil. So good, but two very different flavors. Sochan really has the flavor. I must say it has like an almost cilantro like flavor, but without the issues that people have of like thinking it tastes like blood or soap. Um, and you can eat them fresh as well, raw in salads. You can eat them cooked. You can dehydrate them and use them for tea later. And that's where the medicinal uses come in. It's a very, very common high antioxidant tea that's used to treat various types of cancer. It is a powerful free radical destroyer. It's been shown to shrink tumor sizes. So, very, very useful as a medicine, very high in phytonutrients. So Sochan is great. And then Solomon seal is very good for your gut microbiome, very high in fiber. So it's great for digestion. And it's delicious as well. So I just talked about a whole bunch of plants today.
Yeah, that's awesome. Um, yeah, Sochan is one of my favorites when people are like, "Oh, you recommend one plant?" That's kind of my go-to because they grow in so many different places, and it's food, it's medicine, it's a great habitat plant. Pollinators love it, birds love it.
Yep.
And if any of the listeners want even more information on Sochan, we have a whole episode about that plant with Nico Albert Williams.
Oh yeah, she's the best. I love Nico.
Yeah, so well, I would love to hear anything more you want to say about any plants, but you have been very generous with your time, and um, if if this is a good place to stop, then that's great. And maybe my final question would be, if people would like to follow your work, what's a good place for people to find you?
Oh, that's so nice. Yeah. So yeah, if you want to, I'm on all the social media platforms as much as these days I don't want to be. I don't do a lot of scrolling, but will answer messages. So if you have any questions about any of the plants I've talked about, or harvesting protocols for them or anything like that, feel free to find me, Linda Black Elk, on Facebook or Instagram or Blue Sky, any of those. And I even have a TikTok. You can message me there as well. You can also find out about the work that we're doing at NATIFS, North American Traditional Indigenous Food Systems, at natifs.org. And we teach classes through there, make videos, all kinds of things. So thanks so much for having me, though.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Aaron.
I haven't gotten any random bits of listener-submitted audio recently, but I have been getting a pretty good trickle of listener questions. So for now, I'm going to try doing Q&A on both types of episodes. So please send in your listener questions so that I have some fodder to keep doing this segment. This question comes from Oliver in Maine.
Greetings, Propaganda by the Seed. I've been growing plants and creating a permaculture and ecologically focused landscape in my yard for the past several years, and I'm now at the point where I'm wondering the following question. How do you know when you've created a sufficiently diverse ecosystem, or do you always strive to increase biodiversity? I look forward to hearing your response, and thanks for taking the time to do so.
Thanks for your question. I guess the answer really depends on what your goals are. Biodiversity is certainly an excellent thing to strive for, but it's not the only metric of habitat quality. And having sort of maximum biodiversity definitely comes at a cost in the garden, usually in like the maintenance. My garden is definitely at a point where balancing the sort of level of vigor of around 200 species is definitely a maintenance issue that it's probably going to take years of tweaking to kind of figure out how to manage it in a reasonable way. And yeah, maximum biodiversity doesn't necessarily mean maximum habitat quality. There's lots of factors to that. You might have better quality habitat with a lower number of sort of keystone species that interact with tons of different species than a technically more diverse landscape of species that have less overall interactions. And also beyond biodiversity, structural niches can be very important. So many species of birds need cavities to nest in, which you can provide in the form of birdhouses. Most amphibians need water to breed in, so you can provide that in the form of a garden pond. So some of those sort of abiotic factors should also be part of your calculus when considering like how much biodiversity is enough. So there's really no generalized answer, I don't think. But here are some benchmarks that you might consider as, just something to kind of think about as you envision a longer term garden plan. So the first benchmark for a habitat-focused garden that I would think of is no serious invasives. So invasive plants have negative repercussions on biodiversity and habitat beyond the scope of your garden even, and will make it difficult to maintain any sort of habitat garden. So removing those as a first step seems like a good benchmark. Another one that I hear about a lot is 70% native plant leaf surface. So if you take all the leaf surface in your garden, 70% of those leaves should belong to native plants. And that is some sort of tipping point in the habitat quality and providing food for native insects, which then provide food for native birds, et cetera, et cetera. Another one to consider might be, do you have something blooming through the whole season? Meaning, there's a series of plants that get you, something to feed pollinators through the whole season. And then once you've achieved that benchmark, do you have something from several different plant families blooming through the whole season? And that's kind of where I would, that would be my first place to pause, is once you've got, a few different flowers blooming at all periods throughout the growing season, you've probably provided a pretty significant biodiversity, and you might want to look at other factors like, other habitat niches and stuff like that. Also, ultimately, gardens require human input to continue to exist. So what you want to do and what is like fun or enjoyable for you to interact with in your garden is a major factor. Because if you really enjoy working on that garden and being in that space, then you can do that long term, and it's kind of sustainable in that manner. But if it's too hard to manage, or you get too focused on sort of technical details, it might not be fun, and you might it might not hold interest long term. So just some stuff to think about, and I don't know that there is a technical answer to the question, but those are the thoughts that came up for me.